So I'll welcome everybody to this meeting of the City Planning Committee and ask that if elected members haven't done their COVID safe plan and checked into this meeting, then please do so now, and ask that people turn off their mobile phones or turn them to silent. In the spirit of conciliation, I recognise the deep history and culture of this place and wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built. I acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania La Truita, and who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and rights. I recognise the value of continuing and strengthen Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So we have an apology from Alderman Varakis, I believe, and we have present, we have a quorum, so we have Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta and Councillor Coates and myself, and nobody to co-opt. There's nobody online, I take it, to co-opt? No. So confirmation of minutes. Councillor Dutta, thank you. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Welcome, Alderman Briscoe.
I'm just slightly late.
That's okay. We haven't quite finished. We haven't played through the agenda that quickly.
Oh, we're getting dressed up this evening, huh?
I've got to go to dinner after this, so it's okay.
Item 3, consideration of supplementary items. We have one, so Councillor Harvey, yes, thank you. Those in favour, those against, items carried. Item 4 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. No conflicts. Item 5, transfer of agenda items. No transfers. Item 6, planning authority items, considerations of items with deputations, and we have one item which is the SUP. Can I have somebody move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 7, committee acting as a planning authority, and we move to supplementary item 12, 66 Alexandra Street, Sandy Bay, partial demolition and alterations. And I'll call to the table Mr. Michael Arnold, if you'd like to come to the table. Thank you. And you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you. Volume okay?
Yes, yep, that's fine, thank you.
Thanks for this opportunity. This is the 5th application by this developer, 2 of which have been previously approved by Council, and each new application seeks to increase the number of potential rooms to be let. The previous 8-bedroom application was approved by Council less than a year ago. And so for that application, the local architect did his best to satisfy the needs of the developer and respected the intentions of the planning scheme and the impact on residents in the street. This new proposal by a Melbourne architect has attracted much community concern and opposition. With the new application, the residents in the neighbourhood have much to lose for a building that is substantially larger. All this for 1 additional bedroom. This is, of course, unless the developer intends to convert this to a 3-bedroom building. Interestingly, there are 3 media rooms included in the plans adjacent to the bedrooms. This application pays no regard to the neighbourhood streetscape. It will be the only 2-storey building on this side of the street and would tower over neighbouring properties. By its bulk and design, by no measure could it be regarded as sympathetic to the streetscape. The planning scheme has one of its basic tenets that in terms of apparent scale, bulk, massing and proportion, a new building should attempt to fit in with the existing neighbourhood. Additionally, it sits 2 metres forward of the building envelope in relation to setback, which is a substantial deviation from the requirements of the scheme. It's acknowledged in council literature that the Golf Links estate, which sits on the other side of the street, is the finest example of California bungalow in the nation. This can only detract from heritage values. Short-term gains for one developer should not trump the existing amenity of existing residents on street parking, sunlight, streetscape. I believe this to be an ambit claim, a last-ditch attempt. All the excavation for the already approved 8-bedroom application has been completed. Reinforcing is sitting in the trenches Timber for framing has been delivered on site and all windows are sitting at the back of the block. This building proposal must be at the upper end of unreasonable applications in failing to comply with acceptable solutions in no less than 11 areas, as is indicated in the Planning Officer's appraisal. The Planning Officer has recommended the proposal measured against objective criteria. The planning scheme also includes subjective measures, and these are listed first in the criteria. Apparent scale, mass, bulk and proportion are relative terms. It's pertinent to this decision that the Planning Officer has included statements related to the appropriateness of this proposal in this neighbourhood. And when a Planning Officer makes the following judgments, it's a clear signal that there is reason for concern, and I make reference to 4 quotes from his report from pages 38 to 40. 1, aesthetically the proposal may not be the greatest design that could be achieved for the redevelopment of the site. 2, it is somewhat agreed that proposed development is to an extent unsympathetic to and out of character with the surrounding area. 3, in an overall sense, the concerns raised against the current proposal are not entirely without merit, and there is some sympathy for those raising these issues. And 4th, the proposal is for a large, somewhat singular building upon the site. It is also a substantial departure from what currently exists on the majority of properties in the immediate area. The proposal is somewhat dense and it does appear to exploit the development potential of the site. Finish of the quotes. As is evidenced by the number of representations, there is significant community disquiet regarding the possibility of such an overly intrusive building being in a 1920s built street. We potentially pay a very large price for our loss of neighbourhood character to satisfy a developer aiming for only 1 more bedroom. I'm asking the Planning Committee to refuse this 9-bedroom application in the knowledge that the previously approved 8-bedroom application goes a significant way to addressing the current housing shortage and will have significantly less intrusion on the existing amenity of the residents in the street. I don't know whether councillors have access to the notes that the Planning Officer has given, but I refer you to page 4 of the Planning Officer's report, plate 1, just to stress the point about the magnitude of this proposal. There's in that photo, there's a blue portaloo which sits about 2 metres tall, and this proposed building frontage will be almost 3.5 times taller than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll open it to the committee for questions. Do we have any questions? Councillor Harvey.
So, Mr. Arnold, so the last proposal was refused by council and it was appealed and subsequently approved. And what was your feeling about that proposal when it was approved? Could you have lived with it?
It's still a very substantial building, but it certainly doesn't work its way up to almost the maximum of the building envelope. Half of the first storey sits below ground, and that's where the excavations have already been completed. Again, not necessarily in keeping with character, but significantly better than what this proposal is.
But this is a different architect for this one?
Completely different architect. So this is a Melbourne architect, the previous architect is a local.
And yeah, because we haven't got the photo, I don't think, in the report of the previous development that's approved. Yeah. So I didn't have anything to compare it with. Yeah. So it's much more deep on the block as well as higher.
Significantly higher. It goes almost the full length of the block from 3 metres at the front to within, I think, 0.9 of a metre at the back.
The full depth of the block?
Full depth of the block and extending almost to 9 metres.
Mm. Yep, okay. And you're also aware that it's recommended for approval, so that makes it even more challenging.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Data.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just one question with regards to the fact that it is outside the envelope. In the report, you may have read that the envelope, as you mentioned, there is a point there, but however, it's incorrect because the planning scheme standard has changed. Would you agree to that? Therefore, your argument for being outside of envelope does not stand.
It's just on a little side street, and if there'd been an existing dwelling on the site, then I think this is accurate. But now it's a vacant block. That forms a completely new application, and as a consequence, the setback should sit somewhere between the setbacks of the adjacent properties. Oh, it's a moot point, obviously, but...
Okay.
Questions? Mr Arnold, just in relation to that slip road, obviously you live on...
Sorry,
in relation to the slip road and the traffic movement and access, is there any concern that you have regards this? And I mean, obviously there's parking issues which have been covered quite extensively by other representors.
I believe it's quite difficult site access to the west, but it satisfies the present rulings on the yellow line markings, but because it sits a fraction lower than the rest of the road, you have to pull right out into the road in order to get there. There aren't many buildings on that little slip road, but adding another 6 obviously would potentially make it... There'd be potentially some difficulty with that.
All right, if there are no further questions, if you'd like to take your seat again, thank you. Now, I'll open the item for discussion.
Just a question through you to Chair.
Councillor Dutton.
To the Director. You know, with regards to the solar access diagram, I understand according to the report it has not been provided. How significant is this with regards to shadowing and the decision that we're going to make?
Yes, yeah, Chair. The officers have gone through to some detail in relation to that impact, and have concluded that the impact is not unreasonable or is acceptable under the performance criteria. So there's an extensive assessment within the report on that matter. So that was the conclusion.
Can I just have a clarification there? Page 125, there are shadow diagrams. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think Councillor Dutta said there were no shadow diagrams.
Have you had a chance to see those, Councillor Dutta?
Yes, I have.
All right,
Yeah.
I thought you said, or I must have misheard you wrong. No, what?
Councillor Harvey.
Do you want me to respond?
Well, I did ask a question through you,
Councillor
Chair.
Harvey, can we just
You,
keep
Chair, to the Director, what's the current status of the amendment to the zone? Because we were keen to make sure that we didn't get this sort of thing happening anymore, and that we include that southern side of Alexander Street. What's the caper there?
Yeah. So you may recall in February this year, Council did endorse the expansion of the precinct, Heritage Precinct, to include the bottom side of Alexandra Street.
Yep.
That was approved to be included within the local provision schedule, part of the local provision schedule, and as you would know, that has yet to be endorsed by the TPC, public notification. So it's still a little way off, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, because sadly this will be the building in the street, the eye roller, where people walk past and think, oh, look at all these cottages, and then they come to that one and they'll say, what happened there? How come this, there was a failure that allowed this to occur? Yeah, and I didn't support the last project on this site, and then we had to backtrack a bit because it couldn't be defended in the tribunal. What's the situation here? Are we in the same predicament where if this was refused because it's just wrong, and based on planning schemes that say it's wrong on the planning scheme, what's the chances of defending it, or would we be in the same situation that it'd go to mediation and we'd be forced to approve it again?
Oh,
Yeah, well...
Can you look into your crystal ball, please? And
Look, I mean, I think it's fair to say the officers did have some concerns and expressed that within the report, which is unusual, but felt unsupported by the scheme in its current form to be able to exercise recommendation for refusal.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding that, we have prepared some possible grounds of refusal if the committee were of the mind to refuse it. But given the recommendation, I suspect it's not a strong. It would not be a strong case if we were to recommend refusal.
And just one final question through you, Chair. With the last application that went to mediation, was there any concession achieved at the mediation? Can you remember? Can you go back into the recesses of your mind and inform us?
I just need to check.
Whilst you're checking, we might continue with questions. Alderman Briscoe.
To you, through you to the Director. Obviously work has commenced on the previous approved application. What is the relationship between the footings that have been poured under a previous building permit, and would they have to seek another building permit for the new footings if the footings have to be changed, or?
Yes, through Chair. That's correct. They would need to, if there was, well, they would need a new building permit.
So your understanding is the footprint is bigger, though, isn't it?
It is certainly bigger. It is certainly bigger. That's my understanding. Yep.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know the motivation to commence a development, pour footings, and then put in another application for a different development. That is quite strange. Yeah.
Well, it's an additional dwelling. Whether they see that as an attractive marketing or an attraction to the market more generally, I suppose. But I can't speculate.
No, that's okay. It's not a planning consideration. It's just more of an interest than, yeah.
So we haven't, nobody's moved the motion either as it stands on the books or any draft motion for refusal.
I'm happy to move the motion for refusal.
For refusal based on?
That the Director has indicated.
Based on the front setback not being compatible, and because the site and scale of the dwellings cause an unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties.
That could be included. So the Director, what are the grounds of refusal you've got in front of you?
They are the same ones as the
Mayor,
and maybe Craig, can they be? Oh, have we got copies? Yeah, there we are. There we are. They're up on the screen. Thanks, Craig. So it's a streetscape and also, amenity.
So there's no setback discretion?
There is.
Oh, sorry, not setback, streetscape?
Well, it's covered with the front setback, and that's where that first ground does make reference to streetscape.
Right. Okay, because my concern would be that certainly the fence and the whole look is completely different to the rest of the houses along that side.
Yeah.
Councillor Coates?
Thank you, Chair. Look, through you, just a question to the Director, just to confirm. So when it talks about one on performance criteria being the landscaping of the parking areas, and it's hit the performance because it's got five car spots, and one of the ones talks about the performance criteria has to satisfy, and it's got A, B, C, the landscaping this is, sorry, where it talks about the landscaping, softening, but number B, where it says softening the car parking to reduce amenity impact on neighbouring properties, is that only the neighbouring properties as in those surrounding the subject site? Because we're looking at 3 separate neighbouring properties here. Or does that also relate to what is the landscaping between those individual units that are being proposed?
need to take that one on notice, Chair. I need to.
I guess the reason I ask is that there is clearly, and it outlines there in the report, landscaping between the proposed development and neighbouring properties outside it.
Yep.
But I mean, even if you look at the Midson traffic one where it shows, it's got some nice little graphs in there, but like, you know, but it really is just a big, you know, unless it hits that 5%, it relies then on landscaping elements to visually propose it. But you know, they're all conjoined, as we know. So
Yes, I believe it is neighbouring sites, not not dwellings within the same site, because the scheme does envisage buildings being conjoined under those circumstances. Yep.
okay.
Councillor Data?
Thank you. Chair, just through you, I just wanted to clarify the earlier point that I raised, and the question was asked by Alderman Briscoe. Just to clarify it, and the question was with regards to 6.8.5, where I understand in my reading that the shadow and solar access diagrams were not provided initially, but after advertisement, the shadow diagrams were provided, but the solar access diagrams were not provided. And so the question was more with regards to that. If the access diagram, the solar access diagrams not provided, is there a need for it to come to us before I make the decision? That was the question. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any other questions if the Alderman is not clear on that.
What's the
We'll
difference
try
between-
not to have too much
No,
to
no,
and fro.
I
We'll
think
just-
it's clarification now. What's the difference between shadow and solar access?
Look, my understanding is it's the elevation on the adjacent dwellings. You can have a plan view, but you also need an elevational view as to where the shadow might project on the vertical surface of the adjacent buildings, of which there will be a number of windows in.
Right, further discussion? And we have a motion before us. Everybody clear on that? Oh,
Yeah,
Councillor Data?
thank you, Chair. I would support that motion. I think I see the reasons behind it quite valid. Thank you.
And I'm just, it's interesting and quite curious, I think, with this, what looks like an overdevelopment to me of a site that's pretty well overdeveloped in the first place. But this pattern of development with changes to the proposed changes, it hasn't occurred yet, but with proposed changes to the university seems quite odd and almost a last gasp, really. Is that, I mean, it's allowed as such, I suppose, as part of the planning scheme, but do you see that might be a use that probably won't be as necessary as a concentrated use there, Mr. Noy?
Look, I don't. I don't believe so. I mean, this is a site that's, you know, within 3 kilometres of the GPO, and so I think any of these inner city suburbs that are within, you know, that sort of distance to the GPO is going to be attractive to redevelopment of some sort, unless there's protections put in place where they are warranted. So, and that's why we're seeing the master plan from the university, where significant on the Sandy Bay campus, where there is significant opportunity for housing being provided on that site, because it is within relatively short distance of the CBD, where there is a significant employment base. So,
Through you, Chair.
Councillor Harvey.
We are seeing a number of really substandard developments as well for student accommodation. We had the blue house, which took years to sort out. There's another property at the bottom of Alexander Street where it meets Grosvenor Street. That's basically a row of rooms either side, and they attempted to put rooms in the foundations underneath as well, but that was rejected. so there's been several developments. What I'm concerned about is going forward, has amendments or changes to the current, or has current changes to the planning scheme, has that facilitated more subpar development based around you can extend your building right across blocks? How do we keep a track of this so we can maintain a standard across time? Otherwise, do we have these sort of developments pop up all over the place? And is the new development we're looking at tonight a product of changes to the state planning scheme or to the Hobart planning scheme? Has something changed that allowed a bit more, another bite at the cherry for this?
There has been. Certainly the rear setback requirement under the previous planning directive was relaxed further. That was basically reduced to zero. So that has facilitated this to some degree. There isn't a discretion so far as the rear setback is concerned.
And the previous development that's approved was okay, but this one, the current one, wouldn't have been approved under the previous.
Look, I wouldn't like to necessarily speculate whether it would or would not have, but it certainly would have been another discretion
to refuse it.
Outside of the building envelope.
At the rear, it's outside of the building envelope so far as the front setback is concerned.
So this DA is a product of relaxations of the planning scheme.
Well, it certainly facilitates, as of right, a greater expansion of the building envelope so far as the rear setback is concerned. I think it's fair to say that as part of the Metropolitan Plan, the planners are advocating a much more considered, I suppose, regime of controls to ensure that the amenity of proposed dwellings are improved, because we are concerned about some of the quality that's coming forward. I mean, there's been some really good examples of developments under the current planning regime, but there has been some bad ones, and unfortunately that's what you've got to regulate to avoid the bad examples. And I suppose the planners are advocating for a tweak of those controls as part of the metro planning process that we're going through.
Further discussion, Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, I suppose my objection to this, obviously the planning grounds were on the screen a moment ago, but it is beside the golf links estate, and we've approved an amendment, and there must be always should be some mechanism. If they've got an approval under the old scheme, we've suggested an amendment after they've got their approval. They then jump in and try to push the envelope even further. So there should be some kind of safety valve for us, because we have decided this is an area that should be more protected. Now, as to the design, I'd rather not comment on the design, because I've seen designs like this in our precinct plan. So close to the city, in a precincts in the city, we probably allow this quite happily. We don't know the quality of the work until it's built, presumably. We have no way of sending this to a design panel like we do for major projects. So I think we've got to take it on good faith that the developers will build something they can sell, presumably they can sell, and it'll be sufficient quality. But my objection is it's where it is. It's not so much the design, personally.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried unanimously. So that motion will now go to full council next Monday. Thank you for your attendance. We go back to the agenda, and 7.1.1, which is 3 Terrace, will need to be re-advertised. So can I
Move
ask
that be withdrawn.
Thank you. So that's a procedural motion. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 8.1 is delegated decision report. Can I have somebody move that, please?
Moved.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. I think you got there just before.
I didn't hear him.
Maybe. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. 8.2 is city planning advertising report. Councillor Coates wants to move that, and do we have any? do we have any particular
I go to dinner.
items of concern or of interest?
That's what I'm
But all dressed
stalling.
up, wasn't it? Yeah.
You'll be there for dessert if I have my way.
I used to dress up like that to come to council one day. I'll stand for
Did it? Yeah,
Items of interest, there's one at 94 Barrack Street, which is Guildford Young College, which is part of the modernising of its...
I should get a clear interest if you mentioned Guildford Young College.
I'm flagging it as a matter of interest rather than of concern.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's also a development at 227 Liverpool Street, which is a combined use site, including 3 multiple dwellings.
As on council land?
Just that's for the awning and a sign.
Ah, okay, right. All right, so councillor Coates has moved that. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 9.9 is responses to questions without notice, and we have 2, 9.1 and 9.2. Can I have somebody move that? Councillor
they be
Data,
received.
thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Questions without notice. Any questions without notice? Councillor Data?
Just one question. I'm sorry, I didn't ask when I should have the last time in our city planning. This is in regards to the Central Hobart Precedent Plan, the discussion paper. I noted that there are 5 names, and my question is, what was the rationale, and why is it that there is no Aboriginal name there?
I'll take that question on notice, Chair.
So you take that on notice. Any further questions? Councillor Coates?
yeah, look, it's just for clarity for myself, really, and you might be able to answer it on the fly, but going back to the clause E6.7.8 about that landscaping, parking and the 5%, I guess in my mind I'm envisioning a large development with, I don't know, 100 units or something, and they don't hit the 5%, and so they say you have to do that. You know, I guess my question is seeking to confirm that section B, criteria B, only applies to neighbouring properties and not to those within the complex if they're building a complex. Yeah.
Benoit?
Yes, happy to provide a written response to that, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? So can I ask somebody move that we move into the
Yes.
closed? Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried, and we now